Okay, I'm the last author up. My name is Leslie G. Howell. I work for WeShare. I'm an executive assistant next to Melissa Reed, and I'm going to read an excerpt out of my trilogy. It's an anthology. It's called Get Over It, From Tragedy to Triumph, and it's about 10 authors who told the stories of them hitting rock bottom, whether it was drug abuse, domestic violence, rape, whatever, and what tools that they used to get back up on their feet. My second excerpt that I want to read is my book that's being published right now. It's called Legacy, and it is a historical fiction book, but it is based on my family's lineage, which took me a really long time to research. But I'm going to read from the Get Over It book first. Just as a child, and like she just said, our children, we are all children growing up at some point, and it affects our lives and who we become as adults. So I'm definitely giving a shout out for all the domestic violence survivors, and thank God that we are here and we made it. Okay. The first part that I just wanted to read is "No weapon that is formed against thee shall prosper, and every tongue that shall rise against thee in judgment thou shalt condemn. This is the heritage of the servants of the Lord, and their righteousness is of me, saith the Lord." Isaiah 54:17. This is just an excerpt of when I was a child, and I just wanted to share that with you. I was 3 years old. It was freezing cold and snowing outside. My big brother and I were standing in front of our home in Jamaica, Queens, New York, as our mother gathered our suitcases. My grandmother was in her black Chrysler with the engine running. The car looked like the Batmobile. I always thought of my grandmother as a superhero, as she was always there to rescue us. Grandma had come to pick us up after yet another bout where my father had beaten up my mother in front of myself and my brother. My father suffered from PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, from fighting in the Vietnam War. I would later find out that my father was an abusive alcoholic. As we piled into my grandmother's car, I could see the bruises on my mother's battered face. Grandma drove us across the Triborough Bridge to her house in Upper Manhattan. On the days and months that followed, my mother's face healed. She returned to work, and we searched for a new place to live. My mother was a first-grade teacher with the New York City Board of Education. At night, she studied for her master's degree at New York University. Grandma had found us a basement apartment in a private house in the Northeast Bronx on Wickham Avenue. Brand new houses were being built around the corner on Bruner Avenue, less than 2 blocks away. It was a new middle-class neighborhood called the New England Homeowners Association. It would later and forever be known as the Valley. The year we moved into our brand new house on Bruner Avenue, I was 4. The house we moved into, unbeknownst to me, was purchased by my grandmother. The new house smelled of fresh paint and cut wood. The floors were shellacked and shiny. It was a 2-story brick house that my family had purchased, and it was fully furnished in the basement. We had many birthday parties there. On the weekends, once a month, my mother would have card games and fried fish dinners. My brother and I were the entertainment. We danced and imitated moves from the Jackson 5. My brother and I made friends with the other children in the neighborhood. I always had this uncanny feeling of being inferior because most of the kids on my block had a mommy and a daddy. I can honestly say I only remember seeing my father 3 times in my life. The time I remember most was when my father came to our new home in the Bronx to visit us. I was 5 or 6 years old by then. I cherished being pleasantly surprised and so proud to introduce him to all my new friends. I wanted them to know that I had a daddy too, even though he didn't live with us. We owned a floor model Magnavox television that housed a radio as well as a 33-inch vinyl LP record player. On the day that my father came over, he and my mother enjoyed music by the Nat King Cole and Otis Redding while they reminisced and had cocktails. They were laughing, hugging, and kissing. And before long, they began to argue. Their voices went from cooing to cursing. My father wanted my mother and us back in his life. My mother must have said no. Furniture was being pushed around along with my mother. My heart sank, and my dream of happily ever after turned into a nightmare. I realized that the same thing that had happened back in Queens on that dreadful snowy night was happening again here in the Bronx. Things were being tossed and thrown around until my mother picked up a glass fruit bowl and smashed my father in the face with it. My father's face was cut and bleeding. This time the police had to be summoned. A black and white squad car with its red, white, and blue flashing lights had been dispatched to 2812 Bruner Avenue. The 2 white officers promptly manhandled and handcuffed my intoxicated father. Then they tossed him into the back of the police cruiser. I didn't realize it then, but it would be the last time I would see my father alive. He passed away years later from cirrhosis of the liver. As for the broken childhood that my brother and I experienced, my mother and grandmother made sure that we didn't want for anything. We were given the best educational opportunities. They enrolled us in a private Montessori school in Mount Vernon, New York. Our school bus picks us up right in front of our house, while the other children in our neighborhood caught the bus on the corner. Along our bus route, we picked up Robin G., who's a current actress that was previously married to the famous boxer Mike T. Some of our other classmates and friends were Liza A. and 4 of the daughters of El Haj Malik El Shabazz, otherwise known as Malcolm X. My grandmother was a seamstress and a real estate entrepreneur. She owned 5 houses. She spared no expense in the things that we needed and wanted. I was enrolled in several dancing schools. The Dance Theater of Harlem was my favorite. I performed my recitals at the Savoy Manor Ballroom on 149th Street in the Bronx. I loved the fittings and the custom-made costumes. It made me feel like a celebrity. I studied classical ballet on point, tap, African and modern dance. I also attended Barbizon School for Modeling. My mother believed in giving her children culture. We attended a lot of places that tourists came to New York to visit. We enjoyed Broadway plays, museums, the Circle Line, Battery Park, Central Park, and the Bronx Zoo. And the Apollo Theater is where we got to see James Brown, the godfather of soul, perform. We even climbed to the torch of the Lady Liberty back when that portion was open. Every provision was made to advance us educationally and financially. The fact that we did not have a functioning father in our life did not deter us. My mother eventually remarried, I became a big sister, and my life changed. I'm gonna stop on this one right here, okay? We'll have these available next week, so I'm gonna have a sign-up sheet so you can put your email address and I'll reach out to you when they are here, because I did order some. This is my first published book in this anthology, and my second book is being published right now, and it is called Legacy. It is my first fictional book, and I'm going to read it to you from my phone here. Stay charged. That I don't have to sit in the chair? Well, I guess I'll sit in the chair. Now, this book about legacy is about my family and the memories that I have of the family, and it goes back until before 1865 when the slaves were emancipated. My great-great-grandfather had 24 children. He had 12 with one wife and 12 with a second wife. My great-grandmother was the 23rd child. And so we have a genealogical book of our family, and we actually are in the back because the next child that was born ended up being stillbirth or died in childhood. So we were the last of those Mohicans. So I'm just going to share a little bit about my great-grandmother being born. This is Legacy. This is my fictional book that's coming out soon before Christmas, guys. It is 1880, Northampton, Casey, North Carolina. It was one of the coldest winters on record. The wind was whipping trees to the ground and whistling through the cracks in the windows. The fire made earlier was dying out. Emma, go on down to the house, have one of your brothers fetch me some wood, Miss Louise, the midwife said. She said this as a command, not a request. Wilhelmina lay in agony in a thin, worn blanket on the queen-size wrought iron bed. Sweat and tears covered her pretty caramel-colored face. The midwife had been there to help with the birth of Wilhelmina's 11th child. It had been 10 hours since her water broke. The kitchen had been turned into a makeshift delivery room as soon as the water was boiled and the clean rags were in place. The eldest daughter of the 11, Emma, was holding onto her mama's hand as she squeezed and screamed with each new pain-wrenching contraction. Ah! Emma's presence and support would normally calm Wilhelmina, but today it just wasn't working. She wanted the pain to stop. Checking to see if the mother had fully dilated, Miss Louise spoke. Wilhelmina, that baby ain't fully turned yet. I can see the feet. Do whatever you have to. I don't want my mama to die, Emma said as she dabbed a rag into porcelain basin. She wrung it out, the rag, and then placed it on her mother's forehead. Time was of the essence. The chances of the baby being born alive were getting slim. Carefully placing her hand into the birth canal, Miss Louise physically turned that baby around. Oh, please, God, let my baby be all right. Wilhelmina's outcry was primal. Emma helped her mother sit up and braced herself against her back. With each push, the baby's head could now be seen. Breathe, Willa, breathe. Now push really hard. Miss Louise was sweating now. The baby was almost out. One more good push, Willa, and this child gonna be here. And I'm gonna stop right there. This is Legacy by Leslie G. Howell.
Woo! Yeah!
Do you?
You gonna read it to me with the sound effects?
That is the sound effect.
I'm saying you gonna read the book to me.
Yes, with the sound effects. Yes. When you read it, it's written the way they speak, so you'll know that they have an accent. When you read it, you'll know that because I spelled it just like that.
Well, I got you.
Yeah,
but I want you to
She won't be wanting to come over and read your bedtime story. And this book is very interesting because some of my relatives helped build Hampton University and actually left the manuscript in the archives. And so some of the information that I got came directly from one of my ancestors' manuscript on what it was like to be a slave. Yes, sir. So I did the research. I went to that school and I actually saw the building that he helped build. You know, so it was very interesting for me, and I'm finally come to my end where it is about to be published. I'm going to have a little notebook so you guys can give me your email address and I'll let you know exactly when it drops, because we're going to have a book signing. Definitely. And I want to thank Marilyn, because the last time that I did come as an author was when the Deltas had that literary cafe. And I'm so thankful for that. Yes. So thank everyone. everybody for coming out here today. We all appreciate you being here. Please see all the vendors that have come out to share their wares. And make sure you come up and get a taste of the wine. Yes. And get some vegetables and some fruit. Thank you all for coming. And we're going to do the raffles next.